Well, President Biden touted that this was, as Kira just mentioned, a bipartisan condemnation, a rare show of unity these days against acts he says were un-American. So joining us for a deeper dive into what these violent acts mean, how we got here, what today's bill and law now might mean, we're joined by Greg Chen. He's the Director of Government Relations for the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA. Greg, thanks for being with us.
Thanks very much for having me.
You know, we were just talking, we know that as cases of the coronavirus rose last year ago spring, right? So did the number of attacks on Asian Americans. As I was saying, it's typical of plague. That somebody looks for scapegoats. They're afraid. They look for people to blame. What else do you think contributed to this? How did we get here?
Well, there's no question that the increased targeting of Asians for hate crimes was due largely to the exposure, the scapegoating that came directly from the White House, from President Trump, calling it the China flu, the China virus. That kind of leadership, negative leadership, very much can be shown to have been a cause of the increase of violence, which we saw escalate so dramatically. And the truth is, as Mazie Hirono, the senator herself said, Asian Americans and the communities have been under siege since the coronavirus hit and since the scapegoating by the leadership from the President Trump really began.
On that note, do you have a sense that as we emerge from this pandemic, as more people get vaccinated and life returns to normal, could that lead these incidents of violence to then die down?
Well, one of the real challenges with hate crimes is that it's the outgrowth of division and separation, which is why the themes you were exploring just before on your show about unity and the fact that the country's leaders have truly come together in a bipartisan fashion in passing this legislation is so important. Because when the country sees division and when people hear from leaders that we are being attacked by people, that people from the Chinese government might be hurting us, and when they view people of Asian descent as foreigners, when, you know, as somebody who works in the immigration field, when people are not seen as part of our country, that makes it easier to scapegoat them. And so it's hard to know exactly how long it will take for this to dissipate. That's why this bill is so important. That's why this bill will help bring to light the kinds of incidents that are happening and help end the fear that's happening.
And Greg, it is a happy moment in our politics because it is so rare to see bipartisanship around anything. But you still had 62 Republicans voting against this measure for whatever reason. Do you have an understanding of why that might have been? And what would you say to them?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that a few members of the Congress did not vote for these bills that passed with overwhelming majorities from both parties in both chambers. That is, as far as any piece of legislation goes in Congress, nearly a consensus. That's showing how much support and recognition there is in Congress, hearing from the people that this is an important bill that must be supported. And that is really why this moment is so exciting. And it shows that there is awareness. As the Vice President herself said, racism exists in America. It does. And this is a step of unity to say that we're not going to tolerate it any longer as our country's leaders.
And Greg, one thing we have heard repeatedly while reporting on these cases from people in the Asian American community is that while there may be a rise during the pandemic, that these instances aren't new. They just weren't talked about so much. So do you think that these changes in policing and reporting and how hate crimes are treated, does this give you some hope that despite how awful this whole period has been with the pandemic, that maybe this is something good that may come from it?
Well, certainly the bill is an important step because it tackles this issue of making sure that the Department of Justice has somebody there who's the point person to review hate crimes, and that also provides resources, training, and education for states and localities to know how to report and track these kinds of crimes. I worked in hate crimes against Asian Americans more than 30 years ago in Boston. And back then, there were incidents that were happening. This is just in the wake of the Vincent Chin murder that happened in Michigan, where an Asian person was attacked for being blamed for what was happening with the downsizing, the decline in the auto industry. And I worked in the Boston community for many years. And the fact is that people are afraid to report these crimes. People that I would meet with, elderly folks in a housing community, they wouldn't want to report, even though they would tell me as somebody from the community, because they were afraid the police might not take action, or they thought that the police themselves might somehow be involved with these kinds of crimes, which was rarely the case at all. But people need that trust to be built with their local law enforcement, their local governments. And that's why this bill takes an important step in helping dispel the fear and helping reach out with multilingual education information, which is part of what this bill would help do, to really bring down the kind of fears about reporting, and just to also build up that capacity for the federal government and state and local governments to track these crimes better. Because as your viewers have already heard, the reporting of Asian American targeted hate crimes has been far lower than we think it's actually happening in the community.
All right, Greg Chen, great to have you. Greg, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
It's our pleasure.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.